All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking what has to be one of the most fascinating and, let's be honest, enduring mysteries of our skies. Yep, we are talking about UFOs. For decades, right? The second somebody mentioned unidentified flying objects, our brains went straight to tinfoil hats and wild conspiracy theories. But recently, well, a massive dump of classified government files has kind of forced all of us to take a second, much closer look at what's actually flying around up there in our atmosphere and beyond. It really all boils down to this one massive question. Are these recently declassified videos and documents actual hard proof of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth? Or are we looking at the ultimate, intricately woven government cover-up? To figure that out, we're going to have to play detective today. We're going to follow the data, we'll look closely at the declassified accounts, and try to piece together a puzzle that literally spans over 80 years. So let's kick things off with a totally wild incident that proves this is not just some fringe theory anymore. Back in 2023, at an undisclosed location right here in America, federal agents on a routine operation witnessed something completely inexplicable. I mean, they saw this round, orange glowing orb just hovering in the sky. And this wasn't a one-off thing. Over 2 days, 3 different teams, that's 6 trained federal officers in total, gave sworn statements that they saw this massive orange orb literally launching smaller red orbs. It acted exactly like a mothership launching small planes. And just to add to the whole mystery of it all, 2 years later in 2025, intelligence officials went back to the exact same spot in a helicopter, only to see another orb that suddenly zipped 20 miles away in an instant. I mean, that is way, way too fast for any chopper to follow. Now, if a random guy on the street told you that story, you'd probably just brush it off, right? But these are highly trained agents, and their accounts are officially logged. Which brings us to this staggering number, 162. On May 8, 2026, the U.S. Department of War released exactly 162 new classified files to the public on their webpage. This massive release included Pentagon reports, FBI documents, and 28 videos that nobody had ever seen before. And what is buried in these files are documented, modern encounters that are just absolutely bizarre. Which leads us into our first main area of focus, the modern UFO mystery and these physics-defying encounters right here on Earth. What's absolutely fascinating about these recent encounters is the sheer impossibility of the physics involved. Take Greece in 2023, for example. The U.S. military actually captured an infrared video of an object out over the ocean taking a literal 90-degree turn while traveling at 80 miles per hour. Basic physics, basic inertia, they tell us that is practically impossible for any aircraft we know of. Then skip to 2024 over Iraq and Syria. Surveillance systems caught objects moving at incredibly high speeds, along with these semi-transparent orange areas that just flashed for a few seconds. Same year, over in Japan in the Indo-Pacific, they recorded a football-shaped object with 3 distinct projections. The pattern here is simple but totally baffling. An object appears, does something aeronautically impossible, and then just vanishes. But to truly grasp the scale of this whole thing, we have to look up. Let's talk about sightings beyond our world and the phenomenon in space. See, these anomalies aren't just happening in our skies down here. They're actually happening out in the vacuum of space. To understand this next piece of evidence, we need to quickly go over the military term bogey. It's typically used during wartime on Earth to describe an unidentified aircraft or missile. It's strictly an earthbound term, right? But in 1965, during the Gemini 7 spaceflight, astronaut Frank Borman radioed Houston and said, "Bogey at 10 o'clock high." Ground control just assumed it was a booster from the spacecraft, but Borman was adamant that he could see the booster separately. He was looking at a distinct, totally unidentified third object in space. And those space sightings, they definitely didn't stop there. During the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, Buzz Aldrin reported seeing flashing lights in the cabin and this massive laser-like light source on the moon. Then, in 1972, during Apollo 17, which was the last crewed mission to the moon, a photo captured 3 unexplained dots in a strict triangular formation. Fast forward decades later to a preliminary U.S. analysis released in 2026, and they actually suggested these dots could be physical objects, not camera glitches, real physical objects. So we've got glowing orbs on Earth and unidentified physical objects near the moon? Sounds like definitive proof of aliens, right? Well, hold that thought. Because now we need to look at the hidden military pattern. It's time to connect the dots. When we take a step back and actually map out these modern UFO hotspots like the Western United States, Greece, Iraq, Syria, the Indo-Pacific, this stunning correlation emerges. These are the exact locations of heavily active U.S. military presences and their most advanced monitoring systems. The correlation is absolutely undeniable. UFOs are almost exclusively spotted right where the U.S. military is operating. I mean, why do aliens always seem to visit U.S. military bases? To answer that, we're going to have to take a little trip back in time.
Let's look at some Cold War secrets revealed and the true birth of the flying saucer. We're heading all the way back to the dawn of the Cold War, because this is where the modern myth of the alien spacecraft was really born, and where that strategic pattern we just talked about actually originated. Let's walk through this timeline. In June of 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold saw 9 shiny objects moving at 1,200 miles per hour over Washington state. That was twice as fast as any plane at the time. Then, literally 2 weeks later, in July 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield put out a press release saying they recovered a flying disc on a farm in New Mexico. But then, they frantically retracted it the very next day, claiming it was just a weather balloon. As you can imagine, this sparked a global hysteria. By 1952, unexplained objects were even being seen over Washington, D.C., which prompted the U.S. government to launch Project Blue Book to investigate over 12,000 UFO claims over the next 17 years. But there is this brilliant piece of irony here that completely changed history. When Kenneth Arnold described his sighting in 1947, he didn't actually say the objects looked like saucers. His exact words were, "They flew like a saucer would if you skipped it across water." He was describing their physics-defying movement, not their shape. But you know how it goes, the media misunderstood, they printed the massive headline, "Flying Saucers," and boom, a worldwide cultural phenomenon was officially born. Now, throughout Project Blue Book's 17-year run, they managed to explain away thousands of sightings as stars or satellites or just conventional planes. But 701 cases remained entirely unexplained. That's 701 mysteries that kept the public completely hooked on the idea of alien visitors. Decades later, though, the declassified reality painted a very, very different picture. While the public was totally convinced that Roswell was a crashed alien saucer with recovered alien bodies, the declassified truth was actually Project Mogul. This was a highly classified U.S. program that used high-altitude spy balloons to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. And what about those alien bodies? Well, a 1997 Air Force report revealed they were literally military test dummies, kind of like the ones you'd see in a clothing store window, just being dropped from high altitudes. The U.S. government actually allowed the UFO rumors to spread because, honestly, it was the perfect cover story. I mean, if people thought they were seeing aliens, they certainly weren't guessing that America was spying on the Soviets or testing out advanced aerospace tech. Which brings us to the earthly explanations for UFOs, adversaries, drones, and distractions. So let's bring our journey right back to the present day. If the UFOs of the 1950s were actually top-secret Cold War tech, what in the world are the UFOs buzzing around U.S. military bases today? Well, the earthly explanations are actually just as fascinating as the alien theories. Remember that orange mothership orb from 2023 we talked about? It's pretty well known now that China has actively developed these advanced mothership drones that are capable of carrying and launching hundreds of smaller drones. We also know all about Chinese high-altitude spy balloons. I mean, one was literally shot down over the U.S. in 2023. And in hotspots like Iraq, Syria, and the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian and Houthi surveillance drones are constantly probing military defenses. So many of these unidentified objects are very likely just adversary surveillance tech. They're getting caught on camera simply because the U.S. has its most sophisticated monitoring systems deployed in those specific areas. And as for the space sightings, even astronauts like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin have noted that a lot of space anomalies can just be attributed to natural phenomena, atomic particles, or honestly, even sunlight reflecting off the Earth. All of this leads to a highly definitive conclusion. In February 2024, the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, released a massive, comprehensive report. After investigating claims spanning all the way from 1945 to 2023, they stated firmly that there is zero evidence of extraterrestrial UFOs, and absolutely zero evidence that the government is hiding or reverse engineering alien technology. The truth is, most UFOs are just drones, balloons, rockets, or natural phenomena. So the crucial point we have to ask is, if there are no aliens, why do we keep seeing these massive file dumps that stir up such a public frenzy? Well, the source material notes that critics argue these uncontextualized UFO file releases, specifically pointing to those released during the Trump administration, are often utilized as calculated political distractions. The idea presented in the source is that releasing mysterious, unexplained files dominates the news cycle, basically distracting the public from real-world controversies, such as the Epstein files. Now, regardless of whether you agree with that assessment or not, it really highlights how the mystery of UFOs is often leveraged as a tool, because mystery always thrives where context is absent. As we start to wrap this up, we really have to ground ourselves in this foundational scientific principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Look, believing in the possibility of alien life is exciting. It's a fascinating dream for sure. But blurry 2-minute infrared videos and out-of-context military files, they simply don't meet the extraordinary standard required to prove that extraterrestrials are actually visiting Earth. Which leaves us with this one final provocative thought to ponder. If extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence points heavily toward classified military tech, spy balloons, and adversary drones, are we really looking at the stars when we see a UFO? Or are we just looking at each other, caught up in a high-tech, geopolitical game of hide-and-seek? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time as we continue to break down the world's most fascinating subjects.